So what we're going to look at here in this demonstration of spring skiing is how we can find good, smooth spring snow skiing and keep it safe at the same time. And we're going to use the week of 12 April 2015 as an example. It's an example because there has been some issues with some avalanches that we just saw on a previous image. But to summarize, one of the most important things with spring skiing is to think of spring skiing off-piste as skiing smooth and soft snow. It's not the slushy spring skiing that people talk about or the hard snow that happens in springtime. Springtime's awesome for off-piste skiing and skiing in general if you follow the melt-freeze cycles, and that is all about following the sun around the mountain. So that's the first thing we're going to talk about is understanding melt-freeze cycles. Because off-piste spring snow is one of the best things in the northern French Alps. We're also going to talk about the area mainly here is specific to the northern French Alps, but I think it has a lot of similarities to the rest of the Alps in general. Not only because of ski touring and things, but we have lift access to all slope orientations, east, south, west, and then north. So a lot of this snow can be accessed from the lifts. And so melt-freeze cycles, let's start with that. Once new snow melts in the sun or the heat during the day and then freezes at night, that's one melt-freeze cycle. A few times in successions after a snowfall, the top snow layer will then begin to form a crust that gets deeper and stronger after each melt allows for the free water to drip down and refreeze during the night. So any given melt-freeze layer, which that's what this crust layer is referred to, each time there's a cycle of melting and freezing, this layer becomes stronger because the melting and the free water drips deeper, it penetrates deeper into the snowpack each day, and therefore it can then freeze more, and that crust gets deeper and deeper. If untouched, the top of this frozen snow layer is smooth and solid first thing in the morning. Then it becomes progressively softer as the warm sun and increased temperatures melt and during the day. And this process starts on east-facing slopes because usually the sun rises in the east and shines on east-facing slopes. And then they move to south and west-facing slopes. And then the north-facing slopes generally don't get a melt-freeze layer on them until late April due to the lack of sun. And that's usually you're sort of above 2,000, 2,500 meters. It takes a while for these north-facing slopes to get enough of a melt to have this effect that I just described. So for good skiing, the trick is after a couple of good melt-freeze cycles, once they've created a good solid layer on a slope, you need to get on that slope when the snow surface is smooth and solid with only about 2 or 3 centimeters of soft melted snow on top. And these are generally slopes that have been in the direct sunlight only for an hour or so. So for example, an east-facing slope at 9:30 or 10 in the morning. And then, of course, a little bit later for south, and then even a little bit later on for west. And sometimes you can see that melting process doesn't get to west-facing slopes until sort of midday, 1 o'clock in the afternoon. Then you need to get off those slopes that have been melting quite quickly, because otherwise what happens is the snow gets too soft and mushy, and you start breaking through. And also, for the second part of this talk, we're going to look at some of the dangers of avalanches. Second part of this demonstration here, this video demonstration, there's avalanche dangers start to really kick in most of the time, not all the time, but most of the time in the springtime after the slope has become too slushy to ski. And then they become too unstable after all that melting, and then avalanches can be a problem on these slopes that have been in the sun for a while. So a tip for getting really good snow, spring snow, is after a solid melt freeze layer is formed and there has been a good melt during the day preceding your ski that you're looking to do, it needs to freeze really well the night before. So generally that means a clear, cold night, and cold meaning getting down to at least 0 degrees at the level that you're starting from in this, perhaps, like, let's say, the ski area that you're starting in, because you don't want to be skiing down below the freeze level. And because then you're getting into slushy snow, you start breaking through, and there is the issue of avalanche danger that we're going to talk about in a second. So anyway, a nice, clear, cold night where it freezes down to the level where you're starting at. So you're going up into areas where it got down to -4, -5 if it's a ski area. Quite quickly because you can take the lift. So if you're doing a tour after the lift's closed, for example, you need to make sure that you're starting really, really early in the morning, and it's got very, very, very nice and cold the night before, or you start very early in the morning. Then what you do is you start first thing in the morning on the east-facing slopes, like let's say like 9 o'clock, 9:30 on east-facing slopes is probably as late as you want to get on them, perhaps even 10 o'clock if it's been a very, very good freeze. And then you move around to the south-facing slopes for mid-morning, and then finish with the west-facing slopes about midday, 1 o'clock. Midday if it hasn't really frozen all that great, or if it's really warm, and 1 o'clock if it's been a good cold night and it really froze well, and it's remained fairly cool during that day. If you do this right, you can have some awesome skiing like we've just seen in these videos. Aside from nights that aren't cool enough, because if it doesn't freeze at night, and let's say it's like +4 or 5 down at the level that you're starting at, then it's basically the spring skiing is a write-off because you'll be breaking through, and it gets dangerous in terms of avalanches. So that's one constraint that you're up against. The other constraint is human-made and man-made. It's the only thing that gets in the way of the spring skiing, other than that a lack of freeze at night, is the nasty ruts in the snow that people leave behind because they either ski spring snow, spring slopes, slopes that get a lot of sun, east, south, and west, for example, before the melt layer has formed, like too early, just right after a snowfall, and haven't let the snow go through those melt-free cycles. But most of all, what's even worse is people ski slopes too late, and they sink in and they form ruts and things. I'm going to show you an example of this in a second, when it's too soft and mushy. So it's not that fun to ski to start with, but plus there's dangers involved. So first what we'll do is look at how these ruts that I've just discussed get in the way of actually just enjoying the skiing before we talk about the danger involved with that. So here we can see Jane getting some of that nice smooth skiing. That's actually, these first few turns here are the nicest you can get because that's really untouched. But on the left-hand side of the lower left-hand side of the screen there, you can see there's a rut that someone left from a couple days before, where they skied in when it was too late to ski on that slope, and they probably would have fallen over there too. And right here you can see Jane getting thrown around a little bit, just nudged a little bit there. That interferes with having a good, nice ski. And that rut would have been left the day before, or a couple days before, from people sinking in because they were skiing that slope too late when it was too slushy, and then it refreezes, and those ruts stay there. Basically, in a perfect scenario, once you ski and you leave the tracks like up in the upper right-hand corner, that will melt during the rest of the day, and it'll be nice and smooth for the next day of skiing. So in fact, what this is, this type of spring snow skiing is a type of skiing that is renewable, and if you do it right, then you can have smooth skiing each day. The reality of the situation, though, is there's lots of ruts around. So if you don't do ski touring like we just saw right there, then you end up not getting some nice smooth snow, as we just showed you. The other problem, as I mentioned, is that if you ski on a slope too late, not only do you leave ruts behind and you're not skiing in very nice snow, but there's also an avalanche danger. Now, each one of these avalanches that I'm showing now that occurred earlier in the week happened fairly late in the melt phase. So late in the melt phase for an east-facing slope is sort of at the end of the morning, about 11 o'clock, 12 o'clock. And right here, what we're looking at is an east-southeast facing slope called the Face de Charvet. And we're zooming in on it a little bit. These are going right down to the ground right now because of that weak layer. Now, if you look above this one here, you'll see a slough of snow that came down, and that triggered this layer underneath, or that the bigger avalanche underneath that. And what's been reported in a lot of different places is that normally this at this time of year. After a good refreeze, we can expect wet snow slides on sunny slopes, or the slopes have been in the sun for quite a long time. But the avalanches that we've been seeing are happening quite quickly now, and that's partly due to the melting, but it's exaggerated, and made worse by that weak layer that we talked about earlier in the season. That persistent weak layer now is showing its face again as the bridge that has been formed to protect it of new snow above it is becoming less and less stable due to the melting process and due to the snowpack kind of going from a cold winter snowpack to a spring snowpack. So a cold winter snowpack is purely cold snow that has not gone through any melting and freezing. A spring snowpack and it is a same thing, but on the other extreme, it's gone through melting and freezing, and there's melting and wet snow all the way through the snowpack. But what's happening right now is we're transitioning from that winter cold snowpack into the spring snowpack. And as a result, the snow is going through these changes, and that weak layer is coming back up to the surface, or coming back up to haunt us because of when that melting is going on and dripping through the snowpack and making that snow layer above it weaker again. And there is there's been a number of examples of this around in the last week or so. And above, like sort of Bunval, which is near where I live in Val d'Isère, and in and around Val d'Isère, all these images we've just looked at. And they tend to be triggered by these, at the moment, if it's natural, by a little bit of snow melting and sliding on the top, and then that extra weight pushing down and adding extra stress to the top of the snowpack. And then if that's enough stress, it breaks, it stresses out that weak layer, that persistent old weak layer that's starting to come back into play now, and then it goes down to the ground. Because, of course, the weak layer we're talking about is depth hoar frost. Gobelets, the French call it, and it starts at the ground and works its way up in most cases. And in general, that's what the case is, because we had a thin snowpack and colder temperatures at the beginning of the season, and that's what formed the earlier snowpack at the beginning of the season. Is a very, very weak layer of snow. So all this stuff it's sitting on, the snow that's sitting on now is on a weak layer that was protected from the end of February through March. And the beginning of April was protected by successive layers of snow that packed down, but now those successive layers of snow are no longer protecting it as they melt. And so from practical terms, something to watch out for is a night where it doesn't freeze very well, or where you're at, if it's the freezing level is several hundred meters above where you're starting your ski. That's a real danger sign, and I would definitely be very careful. In fact, would not go out on a tour or off-piste skiing in spring, looking for spring snow on slopes after these types of spring slopes, east, south, west, and now starting to melt freeze on north faces. I would not do it if there's not a good freeze the night before. And when I talk about not a good freeze, again, what I mean by that is the freezing level above, several hundred meters above where you're starting your tour, or you're starting your skiing from, and that could mean if it's 3 or 4 degrees in the morning. When you get up in the morning at the level, the altitude that you're starting or planning to start your ski from. There have been a lot of this weak layer has been reactivated in a lot of sectors of the northern French Alps on slopes that superficially at least appear stable, and it's not just in the northern French Alps. I think it's throughout the Alps in general. So this is something to really watch out for right now. And because of this weak layer, one thing to add to this weak layer does not follow the general predictability of stability and instability in the springtime. And the predictability comes about after a good freeze at night. The snow is usually very stable until it goes through those successive warming on east faces, south faces, west faces, and that's fairly predictable. And then when it's on its frozen phase, it's stable, and when it's on its melt phase, it's unstable. The problem is when there's a significant weak layer under all that snow, it can happen that the rules are broken. And these rules are broken, meaning that sometimes even after a good freeze on an east-facing slope at 9 o'clock, when it looks like it should be good, it'll avalanche. Sometimes even like on a west-facing slope at sort of 11 o'clock, well before it's really melted significantly, at least enough to be pleasurable to ski on, it can avalanche. So this is something that we got to watch out for in this season of springtime 2015. Because of that persistent weak layer in 2014, 2015, December, January, then that weak layer is starting to come back and cause a bit of unpredictability. So certainly when there has not been a freeze at night, then we got to be really careful and perhaps call off a spring skiing outing. And then when we do get out there on the steep slopes, 30 degrees or more. 30 degrees, remember, is about the steepness of a black run. And when we're off-piste on those 30-degree slopes, we got to be really, really careful and keep our eyes open and watch out for this potential for this persistent weak layer to be releasing on the slopes we're on. Does that mean I'm not out spring skiing after a good freeze at night? No, I'm out there all the time and enjoying the spring snow. It's just that I'm that much more vigilant at the moment. But I think this week is looking good for some pretty decent freezes at night because of the clear skies that are forecast for the night, and then the big freezes melts during the day are great because that means the free water's still dripping right into the snowpack, and in hopes that the night after that it's going to be a good freeze. We look forward to another good day of spring skiing the following day. But keep your eyes out for the bulletins. Keep your eyes out for the posts and on Twitter and Facebook that we're doing at Henry's Avalanche Talk, and you'll get some good feedback on all of this. And I'd like to thank also for some references to David George from Piste Oars and Alain Duclos for some of the things they've posted on their website. Alain Duclos on dataavalanche.org and David George on pisteoar.com. Thanks very much. Have fun and be safe.